Hi, Lorna.
Good morning, good afternoon, wherever we may be, whatever time it is. Hello. Well, we are a goodly number, and welcome everyone to our very first meeting for the PCNV for this year, and a year in which we have begun with a series of 2, of which this is the first one, and with some little differences which will enable your participation a little bit more in our meetings or in a different way. We, first of all, please note this year we are meeting by Zoom only for practical reasons. We think that suits a lot of people, and we want you to be able to feel you fully participate in our meetings, sharing ideas of our speakers. And as always, I'll say this generally on behalf of PCNV, we're always concerned to make our beliefs and our religious thinking as relevant as possible to daily living. And that's what today's and next day's meeting's all about. We have 3 speakers today to tell us their stories of how changing their mind in religion has affected their living. But before I introduce the speakers, I would like to just give you a fuller picture of our plans for these first 2 meetings so you know where you fit in. During each presentation, you're invited to write any questions you might have in the chat option on your screen, and we ask please that you address these questions to one specified speaker, and as always, you know you will be brief. However, there's no Q&A session to follow this particular meeting. Your questions will be held over for these speakers for our next meeting in April, but record them nonetheless. They will be held for you. Today, instead of a Q&A session after the speakers and presentations, we'll go into breakout groups to talk among ourselves and to reflect on what we've heard, share ideas, and perhaps our own stories and thoughts. Please note that a video of today's meeting will be available on the PCNV website from Thursday of this week. And we encourage you to share this, share it with others, perhaps get together as a group and at least let others know that it's there. And I'm just to remind you that in relation to your response, if questions do arise, and after the meeting and after you've had your breakout groups, you can still send a message, you can still send a question to the PCNV email address, which you will have, pcnvictoria.org.au, or I'm sorry, I missed that at the beginning, info@pcnvictoria.org.au. And finally, looking forward to next month already, we have our second in this series, which is How I Changed My Mind About Religion. And that will be a conversation between the Reverend Dr. Jeremy Greaves, Archbishop of Brisbane, and our President Adrian Pyle. So that's the overview. And now to today's meeting and presentations. We welcome not only you as our listeners, but particularly our 3 speakers. And the first of these is Robert Renton. I have asked each of the speakers to provide a small biography that I can read for you, and herewith I read Robert's. Robert is originally from Port Adelaide, South Australia. He was ordained in the Presbyterian Church in November 1974 and retired from the Uniting Church Ministry in December of 2016. He served as chaplain at Pendley and Essendon Grammar School for 11 years, and then at Wesley College for 2 years, and as a Presbytery Minister Administration for 9 years. Other roles include high school teacher, 5 years in South Australia, and head at Wesley College, Melbourne for 19 years. There's Robert. And we welcome you, Robert, and would be keen to hear what you have to say to us.
Thank you. My first thing is to please apologise for the rather unsightly nose. I've had a skin cancer removed and the bandages are yet to come off. Excuse me reading this, but I wanted to keep to the track. Many years ago, I watched a series on television on the topic of world religions. A journalist who was something of a fellow traveller to religion interviewed people associated with each religion that he introduced. And when he came to Hinduism, he interviewed a Brahmin sage and commented on the enormous multiplicity of the gods of Hinduism, perhaps with a little touch of cynicism. The sage replied that there is only really one true God in Hinduism, that's Brahman, towards which the multiple other gods were signposts pointing to Brahman. And the journalist replied, well, what if the followers of the multiple gods get stuck on their particular god or signpost and don't look or go further? And the sage replied, well, for them, God is not in a hurry. And the neatness of that answer has stayed with me and has proved helpful for me as I made changes in my mind about religion. I was brought up in a Presbyterian family. Mum was my first Sunday school teacher. Dad was an elder. We were part of that Port Adelaide Presbyterian Church, which had 2 additional preaching spots at Peterhead and Largs North, and we had students for the ministry assisting the minister on Sunday mornings. Now, these students were really varied in their form of ministry and their appearance or style. We had Dutch migrants. Some were ultra serious and wore a collar and grey stock all the time. Others were late middle-aged men who were very down to earth. And one was a young man who wore a beard, smoked a pipe, and rode a motorbike. Well, his sermons and the discussions that we had were very challenging and thought-provoking for me. And the influence of that young man was such that I eventually offered to candidate for the ministry and was accepted. But for a variety of reasons, I took up high school teaching, which had been my original career choice. And I didn't start my theological training until 6 years later in 1972. Because by then I was married with 2 very young children, I had to have a job, so I was a home missionary for the 3 years of theological training. 2 things happened over those 3 years. The first was that my experience of work as a teacher became a measuring stick for the work as a home missionary. And to be honest, I found the home missionary work did not inspire me as much as teaching had done. The second thing was that the theological education itself has opened up new ideas. Some of them were reinforcing of my sense of call to the ministry, but some raised questions that I could not easily answer. Now, why didn't those questions about vocation and questions about religion unsettle me enough before to not proceed to ordination or to resign after ordination? Well, there are 3 answers. The first answer is a purely pragmatic one. We had taken the major step of leaving South Australia and had migrated to Victoria. We left everything behind, family, job, and the home we knew in South Australia. To not proceed to ordination and acceptance of a parish responsibility would have required a very brave step, which I'm afraid to say I was not prepared to take. The second reason was that I was offered as part-time chaplaincy at Penley and Essendon Grammar after only 2 months of being in my exit appointment. And so with the support of the Kirk session, I accepted the appointment, and that meant I was back in a school environment as well. And so my love of teaching was being reinforced. In that sense, I had the best of both worlds. The third reason was most important and something I discovered through chaplaincy. More about that in a minute. At the end of my theological studies, I became involved with the Cairn Miller Institute, the Human Relations Movement, and the Augustine Centre, led by the Reverend John Alexander. This involvement led to some significant challenges to the way I had experienced and learned about faith, and it succeeded in opening my mind to a lot of different and I thought exciting ideas about human relations, and in recognising the world of religious thought and expression beyond Christianity. However, back to the work as chaplain. 95% of my time as a chaplain was spent in classrooms and in speaking to assemblies. And I very quickly learned that the bulk of students had little or no contact with the church. And some of those that did had very basic fundamentalist ideas of what Christianity was supposed to be all about. So I was confronted with the need to find ways of talking meaningfully about Christianity and religion and other religions, and the traditional terms, the use of prayers or hymns or even Bible stories, were of little and in most cases no value almost, except for the parables of Jesus. So I had to find new ways of communicating what I believed was the essence of religion, and specifically Christianity. And it was this that opened up the world of progressive Christian thought and explanation. I found more and more that if the teaching and questioning that Jesus presented was talked about without the clutter of the church's accretions of doctrine, some students actually responded, and they were prepared to open their thinking a little further and even ask questions. So in attempting to understand religion more widely and provide pathways for students to find what religion might mean to them, I renovated my own faith. It didn't matter to the students or to me that we weren't able to come to firm conclusions and affirmations. So the Hindu sages' comment, "For them, God is not in a hurry," became important to us both. I live in two worlds. Progressive Christian ideas now predominate in my mind and heart, but I still read bits of the Bible and a commentary most days. And even though I can't attend church because of my disability, I provide the local congregation's weekly newsletter, and I edit their worship service video and put it onto YouTube. And I've only just ceased being a member of the church council, which met for the most part online. It's very hard to separate from the church that has nurtured for all of my 78 years. That's my story. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Our personal story is always a powerful one. And we look forward to our next story, How I've Changed My Mind About Religion, from Rod Peppiatt. And again, I asked Rod for a bio, and here we go, on with the glasses, Rod, and this is what you told us. Rod is a husband, dad, granddad, minister of the Uniting Church, currently based in Blackburn. He has a restless passion for church and the way of life shown in Jesus of Nazareth. Reflecting on nearly 30 years of ministry and just over 60 years of life, Rod is aware of many changes in his experience and the practice of life and faith. Is he religious? Probably, but it sometimes depends on who's asking, why, and in what context. Well, Rod, here we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorna. Hi, everyone. I've really enjoyed thinking about this topic today, and in preparation for what I'm about to share with you. So I'm actually really appreciative of the invitation. I'm a bit like Robert, that I'm going to read some of what I've prepared because that helps me stay on track. When I was asked about this topic, this question, first thought that immediately hit me was, well, am I religious? Thus the bit in my profile. And then secondly was, have I changed my mind? What if I have, from what to what, or what's gone on there? I've never been able to say or to join in when others have said, I'm not particularly religious, but I'm spiritual. That's never quite fitted for me because I've never really understood what it meant. And it gets overlaid in many situations with what a friend of mine calls a bit woo-woo. It's a bit esoteric and airy-fairy even. So where I came to was a series of questions to start with. What do I think religion is? Is that different from what everyone else thinks it is? And how do I relate to it? And I share some of this with you because it's actually been really important for me in my thinking and preparation for today. Funnily enough, if you go online and you look up religion, you get some definitions. Things like, quote, from the Oxford Dictionary, belief in and worship of a superhuman power or powers, especially a god or gods. Didn't really fit me. Or a particular system of faith and worship. Yeah. Or a pursuit of interest followed with great devotion is another one there. And then I looked at Britannica online, and it said this, which rang some bells with me. Human beings' relation to that which they regard as holy, sacred, absolute, spiritual, divine, or worthy of special reverence. Now, I wasn't completely sure about the absolute, but the rest of it rings quite a lot of bells for me. Particularly more than the one about the superhuman power, because that's one area of my life and faith that I'm very clear has changed. I no longer experience or relate to God as a being or even a super being. The old man with a beard sitting on a cloud. I don't sit on a cloud, but the beard's growing greyer. That ceased meaning for me many years ago. And I'm much more likely now to use expressions like holy presence or sacred mystery or life in all life. Or a couple of other favourites for me, or meaningful ones for me, is the words of Paul in Acts chapter 17, of the one in whom we live and move and have our being. Or the affirmation of another Paul, Tillich, who said that God is not a being, but is the ground of all being. In the bio, I mentioned context. Context is really important to me. And my context is, as Lorna said, I'm a minister within a church congregation, a local community, and that continues to be very important for me. So saying things like, I don't believe in a being, as you might imagine, can occasionally get a bit tricky, particularly when I, as the minister, lead public prayer. It can be tricky holding to my own sense of God while treading carefully among quite different understandings of the people with whom I'm joined in prayer on Sundays. And that's been a challenge for much of my ministry. I remember 25 plus years ago now, being in a small rural parish in South Australia, And I was asked by those at one end of the parish to pray for rain. And I was asked to pray by the people at the other end that the rain would stop. And I can't exactly remember what I did, but I know that even then I didn't share the sense of an interventionist God who stopped and started rain. So I probably disappointed both sides. As I said, that's been a challenge, which has been really important for me. So what have I done about some of those things? One thing that I've noticed that I have done over the last 15 years or so is to claim for myself and the churches in which I work the biblical practice of speaking symbolically about the divine. And what I mean by that is whenever I use the letters G, O and D in that order, I use capitals to remind myself and others that we're not naming a being. We're actually using a symbol for something unnameable. For me, it's a sacred presence. Others use different language. And I like that. It is very meaningful for me. And each time I explain it to people, I find a response that says, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. And of course, it is a practice of the ancients who used symbols such as Yahweh or the Lord or even I am to describe their experience of the holy. The other thing that has been really important to me as a change is that the embrace of holy mystery has become something that has grown with me as I've grown older. So I reflected on these things in preparation for today, and it occurs to me that they've grown in me because I've been part of a community and communities within that have nurtured that growth and encouraged me to talk about and practice them. And for me, sitting now, I think that's what religion is. And I think it's because of that that I actually continue to identify as religious. Not in the tribal sense of, I am a Christian, that is my religion and it's right and you're wrong and all of that sort of stuff. And not in the sense of a defining doctrine by which we measure who is in and who's out and who's acceptable to God and all of that. This next bit's a bit flippant. Not in the sense of the Queen of Hearts telling Alice in Wonderland that she believes 6 impossible things before breakfast. I'm religious in the sense of a community of fellow travellers doing our best to work out this thing called life together and what we do about it, and continuing to find holiness in that. So when I talk about what has changed in my understanding or of how I've changed my mind, that's a very key thing. I now think much more of the community of fellow travellers, the community of inquirers, the community of frail people doing their best to support each other. If I may, there's a couple of things, specifics within that in which I have changed my mind and my practices, because I sort of got to that point and remembered that it's meant to be about how we live. I believe we need to take the Bible seriously, not literally. And that is something that I think I have changed over many years. And among other things, one of the practices for that has been talking in church and elsewhere about the stories and the teachings that trouble us, and even the ones that we've found ourselves needing to abandon, including things like talking on a Good Friday, in a Good Friday service, about how I can no longer find safety or credibility in statements like, he died for my sins. I found others for whom that was very liberating. Taking the Bible seriously calls me to take the sacred teachings of other religions and other forms, other sources of wisdom seriously, not to sort of grade them as better or less important than my own. And if I ever believed that those who followed other paths might go to hell, it's a long time since I did so. In fact, I'm no longer afraid of a place waiting for me after my death if I don't ask Jesus into my heart or call him my personal Lord and Saviour. One of the most profound experiences of my life was holding our firstborn child in my arms for the first minutes of his life, yelling his head off as it happened. In that moment, I was drawn into the sense of holiness in a way that I don't think I have been before or since. Not in the sense of intelligent design, but as I held him, and I find myself doing this as I tell the story, I was drawn physically and emotionally and spiritually into an experience of transcendence that I still struggle to put words to, even 32 years later. What I like is that I no longer feel I need to put words to it. I just need to let it be. That same experience put me on the path of dismissing original sin as strange and dangerous, and being surprised that I ever thought it made sense. It's led me down the path of abandoning most of the classical atonement doctrines as well, and I think I have found myself healthier for it. One of the most dramatic, I think, as someone who remains a minister in church, is that I have changed my mind and my practices around the area of human sexuality. And that was a long journey for me, beginning with my friendship with a gay man who was very, very kind to Catherine and I, who was afraid to share his sexuality with members of his church in case they would abandon him or reject him. And I think he was right. And that's a journey that has had many turns, including a moment that I'm very proud of, and that's being part of the Uniting Church Assembly meeting that gave our ministers permission to conduct same-gender marriages, which I've since done. As I went to that meeting, I thought I was in favour of the proposal on the basis of justice. But while there, I realised it was on the basis of following the way of Jesus of Nazareth as best I could. It became a religious conviction. And finally, my practice in church these days is to include a contemporary reading of grace alongside a reading from the Bible, believing that however we understand it and live it, and however it influences us and shapes our actions, sacred thinking and experience didn't stop with the closing of the canon, and it's not limited to the Bible. That's been something that, again, I can chart as a bit of a progression in my life. So I guess in summary, what has changed for me most is my sense of what religion is, and also my sense of the community, how the community of religion, including its tricky scriptures, remains important to me in the midst of all that has changed. I think I'll leave it there, Lorna, please. It's probably long enough, way too long. You're muted. Yep.
I didn't press the button adequately. Is that better now? Good. The power of the personal story, Rob. Thank you very much for all the things you've mentioned in that. I'm sure that many of us relate, if not all, many, many parts of that. Thank you so much. Our third speaker is Reverend Alexandra Sangster. And once again, here come the specs. I'm reading what Alexandra has sent to me. Alex, thank you. The Reverend Alexandra Sangster has been working as a minister of the word in the Uniting Church of Australia for over 18 years and as an actor and facilitator for over 20. She's taught at the National Theatre, Centre for Theology and Ministry, Whitley College, facilitated many retreats and workshops in both corporate and community sectors, designed to awaken, inspire, and challenge. Alex is passionate about breaking open story in ways that liberate, inspire, awaken in many ways, and which create connections with the emerging church and those who are spiritually hungry, but culturally anti-institution. Alex works as an activist with Love Makes a Way, and most recently, or sometime, was arrested for blocking the gates at the Adani frontline. There's one giveaway where what Alex believes has influenced the way she lives. Thank you so much, Alex. We look forward enormously to what you have to say.
No worries. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Lovely to see you all. Hello. Thank you so much to the previous two speakers. That was really very moving listening. Thank you. So I've got 10 minutes. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes of stuff. The first thing to say is that I didn't have to do what you all had to do, which is deconstruct. So because of the work that you all did, it's like in the same way as a feminist, there's a whole lot of work that I didn't have to do because the feminists that went before me worked incredibly hard and fought incredible battles. And so I'm sort of the beneficiary, and my job is to keep doing that work. But with Christianity, I didn't have to do any deconstruction because I wasn't raised as a Christian. So there was a whole lot of stuff that you guys were given and taught and inculcated in and fed that you then had to go, that's icky, and no, but she's my friend, and I don't think there is a hell, and but what do you mean Mary was a virgin? And so all that stuff, I didn't have to do it. So, which, is very cool. So thank you very much. And there ends my speech. No, I'm joking. So what I thought I'd do today, instead of talking about all the changes that have happened within my theology, and there have been some, but not heaps, to be honest, which is I look back at the first sermon I preached and I'm like, yeah, which was basically, for my other two speakers, all about why God was not an interventionist. And, so that was 20 years ago, and I'm sticking to my guns with that one. But shameless plug, I have just written a book. Ta-da! And it's about to be launched, which is very exciting. But the book is all about religion and why religion and being a minister. So what I thought I might do is just read very quickly some excerpts from this to try and capture some of the journey along the way. So I hope that feels okay. So this is just from the introduction. Not many people imagine that one day they will grow up to be an ordained minister. I certainly didn't. I was raised by socialist hippies up in Melbourne in the Dandenongs. Neither of my parents had anything to do with institutional religion, and both were scathing about the church. What my parents did believe in, though, was social justice and changing the world. And I grew up knowing that I had to do this. One of the most common reactions I get from people when they find out what it is that I do is shock. And not just shock because I'm a woman or shock because I'm under 95, but shock because their understanding of the Christian church is that it is a place of raging fundamentalism, racism, sexism, homophobia. And so these folk who don't know me ask, but how and why? Why would you want to belong to an institution that is symbolic of all these things? As I grew up, the awareness of God that I had inside didn't leave me, but the stories that I was told about God, I didn't understand. If God was all powerful, why was there so much suffering? And how could this God, who I knew in my heart as sort of a deep, and burning and electric love possibly have preordained the death of his son in some kind of weird sacrifice for the collective sins of a people born out of a fairy tale Adam and Eve, who themselves had only sinned because God had tempted them in the first place? Yes, so I didn't get the church. So when I found myself called in a way both awful, full of awe and mortifying to my very core, I did not even have the language to understand what this call was. So that's a little bit from the introduction of the book. And I'm just I don't actually have a copy of it yet, so I'm having to scroll through and find some bits that might be relevant to this story. Here we go. Let's find some things. The ashes. The room is small with one coffin and one cupboard. It smells like sand, like dust, like cheap candles. In front of me, leaning against the wall, there are rows of tiny houses made out of what looks like tin. The houses are heaped at awkward angles. It's like the aftermath of an earthquake. The ground has cracked and they are the survivors and they are teetering on the edge. I know about these tiny houses. Last time I was here to do a funeral, I'd asked the funeral director, him with the slick back hair and the three-piece suit, what's with the little houses? Houses? Oh, you mean the candle boxes. It's for the Greeks. They light the candles, you know, for the dead. Later, I look them up and discover in the Orthodox tradition, each grave has its own little house to sit on top of the marble with a lit candle within, and it burns for 40 days and 40 nights. Just the same amount of time, apparently, that Jesus was running free in the wilderness after his baptism, taunted and tempted by the darkness and fed on hope and honey by the light. Apparently, the burning candle inside the tiny house is meant to symbolize a vigil of constant prayer for the deceased. I wonder if by lighting the candle, the family feel that their work is done, or if they also pray. And if so, what do they pray for? Intercessory prayer has never made any sense to me. Either God is love or God is not. And certainly God has no power, at least not in the bolt of lightning kind of way. This much seems abundantly clear. Think tsunami, think Holocaust, think mother birthing in a bombed out cellar, think everyday random tumor, think child stepping off a tram, think speeding car, think abyss. My research reveals to me that one local company has designed a special little house made of ColourBond with a perspex window to stand strong in the Aussie sun. And that in Alaska, the Appalachian First Peoples who were colonized by the Orthodox missionaries have created their own version, tiny, colourful wooden cottages painted in the colours of the family, placed on the graves of the wee spirit house. I wonder if sometimes maybe the souls decide just to hide inside the houses and not come out. How nice it would be to visit, to peer through the tiny windows and watch them going about their days making soup on tiny stoves and reading poetry by the fire. I'll skip through to another bit. I hope this is fulfilling the brief. Here we go. The Call, Chapter 1. Minister, c. 13th century medieval Latin, meaning priest, from minus, minor, meaning less or little, originally to serve. So I am called to be little and to be less, and to act with the authority of another and to serve. It's not your usual job description. And yet here I am, kneeling on a dark green carpet. I'll find some more. Here we go. The pastoral visit, 1. I am standing at the door. I am knocking on the door. I think it's the right address. That was the one given to me by the funeral home. I am knocking. Yes. Oh, hello. I'm the minister. I've come about the minister. No, we don't need a minister. No one needs a minister here. No one needs a minister. No. She slams the door shut in my face. The world won. I didn't grow up wanting to be a minister, but a minister I am. That sentence alone is strange enough. When I was little and as I grew older, if I thought of ministers at all, which I rarely did, I thought of an old robed man from a medieval world of conservatism and cardigans, like on the BBC in a village. Well, yes, yes, you see, Mrs. Heighton, but as you can recognize, the Lord does not feel that way. We did not go to a church as a family, not even in a Christmas and Easter kind of way. It was simply an irrelevance. The world too. So wait, does that mean you believe in God? The party is a kaleidoscope of bass beats, smoke, dense air, warm bodies pressed up close and on the move. He's yelling into my ear and I am plummeting internally. I have had this conversation so many times. It usually goes like this. So what are you studying? Theology. What's that? Theo from God and so like the study of God. Oh, cool, right? Yeah, like all the gods, like Thor and Buddha and stuff. No, actually, just Christianity. Oh God, why? I'm training to be a minister. like a priest with a church and shit. What will you like? Are you gonna like sermons and shit? Like, why would you want to do that? I'm almost coming to an end. I'll find a couple more bits. Let me find a little bit about someone that you know. Oh, here's a bit you guys might remember. The assessment. So you're here today for your psychiatric assessment for the ministry. I mean, we want you to be hearing the voice of God, but not to be hearing voices. You know what I mean? just my little joke. Don't be nervous. Let's start with your mother, shall we? Tell me about your mother. And let's find one last bit and then I'll stop. The Crow 3. Wow. Crow comes with me to the funeral of my friend, Margaret. Literally, he is there. He is always there. Crow hops on one claw. Going to visit people who are dying is kind of part of the drill, like core business. Patches, matches, dispatches, that's what we do, I was told by a professor at Theological Hall. And so I do. I visit. Sometimes there is fluid like tears and sweat and all the other outpourings that seep and flow and flood from our breaking bodies. Sometimes I hold hands or take off bras or remove sheets. Sometimes there is vomit and they apologize and weep, and together we wipe and settle back, smooth the dying pillow. Sometimes they are sleeping and part of my brain curses because I will have to come back and see them again. And actually I'm crazy busy and I don't have time, but I know I will have to find the time before they die. And then I feel dreadful because when they finally open their eyes, I am so grateful that I get to bless them and say thank you and well done. And other times they yell while gripping my hand with a force that my blood starts thrumming, and they sear through me with wild, unseeing eyes, and they beg me, let me go, like I'm some kind of gatekeeper, like I can open a curtain or a window like the old Irish nurses do and let the soul escape. Let me go, they plead. And I find their sight and I hold their gaze and I say, it's okay. You can go now. You have done well, God's faithful servant. The hardest and the best, of course, are the parishioners who have become your friends, the ones you love and who love you too, which is against the minister's code of ethics, not the love part, but the friendship part, but we all do it and cannot help it, and we don't kind of care what the rules say. I'm going to hold it there. So, tiny excerpts from a story I've been working on for a really long time, the essence of which is about this question of how has religion changed me. And all of you know, because I know you know all this stuff already, that the word religion comes from the Latin religio, ligament, that which connects. So my awakening into religion has been my awakening into a connection with an extraordinary communion of saints living and dead. And I am utterly grateful to the church for saying yes to me, which doesn't stop me from being pissed off at the church a lot, but grateful all the same. And I hope that that's been sort of an illuminating and maybe playful way to enter into the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. The word religion at the end, linking, making ties, I think we can all say thank you for the insights that you've given us from your experience and those very story-filled way. So thank you very much to all our speakers. Aren't we lucky to have a variety of people to offer us honestly from their own hearts, carefully put together stories from their lives, which will illuminate ours. I just want to, in expressing those thanks, remind you again that there will be a video of this whole, of all the presentations and this meeting of us together on the PCNV website from about Thursday. So do look out for it and revisit and come back to the gems and have a think about it further. And as I said, encourage you to share it with friends of yours, and I'm sure they will find it fascinating too. Written questions in the chat function may be extended, as I said, by further questions to the website, to the email. And now, as promised, you have a chance to join a breakout group and simply have a chat, have a talk about what you've heard. Our three extraordinarily interesting and varied presentations today. And when you will receive an invitation to the breakout group, I have to confess that I'm not very au fait with this, but Adrian, our technical man, tells me this is how it works. You will receive an invitation on your screen, which I presume you accept, and you'll find yourself in a small group of people with whom you can then further discuss, talk, share your stories, your thoughts after today's input from our speakers. And here's the important bit. You can stay in those groups just as long as you like. There is no plenary session to come back to. We're not asking for any reporting back, but simply enjoy your conversations and finish your group just when you want to. And the main thing to say and to carry on is that we look forward to seeing you again as a whole group for our next meeting on Sunday, April the 28th, when we will hear further stories, insights in the conversation between Archbishop Jeremy Greaves and Adrian Pyle. So thank you all very much for your attendance. Most special thanks to our speakers. I think I may call on you to express your thanks in the way that Zoom allows to our speakers right now and say that has been enlightening and inspiring, and you've given us an experience. So thank you.
Thanks, Lorna. Thanks to our speakers as well. I'm Adrian Pyle. I am that technical man that Lorna spoke about and the president of PCNV. I'm going to send you off for a Zoom room experience very shortly, which I'm padding here because I'm just getting it ready in the background. But if you'd like to stay on for that, we're going to finish about 5 o'clock. We'll probably keep it running a little bit longer than that. When you go into the Zoom room, have a chance to introduce yourselves to those who've joined with you there, and a bit of a conversation about what was especially meaningful for you. We haven't really received too many questions during the session, so as Lorna said, you can send those to info@pcnvictoria.org.au. I'll just put that up very quickly on the screen so you can see it. So send any questions through to that, and we'll make sure that they get included into the conversation that occurs at the next session.